Every card game starts fair, and then the second set comes out. Welcome to Wonders Workshop, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about power creep and how different games handle it. What is it? What does it look like? All that fun stuff. If you haven't already, please go ahead and give us a like, comment, and a subscribe. I'm super excited to be talking with y'all today. So the first thing that we need to address, in case anybody is not familiar with the term, is what is power creep? And it's in card games. I'm going to use the term specifically within card games. It is when new cards or new abilities are released and they are significantly more powerful than previously released cards or abilities or sets even. And this is really common. I can't think of a card game that doesn't struggle with power creep. I've been playing Magic since I was in elementary school, and I've now graduated from college. So I can tell you there's been some power creep in Magic. And power creep is basically inevitable. And I know a lot of people are going to fight me in the comments. Feel free to. I want to hear what you have to say. Because humans, psychologically, we love novelty. We love something new. We love for things to be exciting and engaging. And the only way for games to do that is to make things different, bigger, better. And so for a game to succeed, there has to be, at least in Grace's opinion, some level of power creep to keep that novelty factor alive. Because if we start here on what power looks like, what the cards can do, well, the next time you need to get people engaged, you can't go here again. They already know this. You gotta step it up just a little bit. And that's kind of the inevitability of games. When you're releasing new things, like in most card games, you're releasing new sets every year, every 6 months, every 9 months, whatever it is. And you know, there's some great examples of this in Magic the Gathering. And I'll be putting those up on screen as we talk about them. But there's a couple different types of power creep. For my Wonders fans that are watching, I'm going to use examples from Magic, but I expect that we'll see similar types of power creep in Wonders over time, because any card game is going to have power creep, and we haven't gotten a second set yet, but I think we're going to start to see what some of that looks like. And I'll talk more about how Magic and Wonders both handle power creep at the end of the video. But for now, I'm just going to talk about a couple of the types of power creep. The first one is kind of called just simply better. And this is when a card is simply better than another version of a card. There's a bajillion great examples of this in Magic. And I don't want to list through every one of them, but I will give you a couple of examples. Mahamoti Jin versus Kyrie the Swirling Sky. They both have the same mana cost. For people who are not aware of how Magic works, basically there's a number up at the top of the card. I guess it would be on this side since I'm going to be mirrored. And that tells you how many lands you have to use to play that card. And so these cards cost the same amount to play them. And they both have flying, and they both have the same power and toughness. But they do very, very, very different things. And one is much more impressive than the other. Well, they're not quite the same, now that I'm remembering it. But they're very similar in power and toughness. But if you look at it, Kyrie, or I'm assuming pronunciation here, Mahmoudi Jin, I'm never going to pronounce that right, is a 5/6 with flying. It is an older card, like a card from the 90s in Magic, I want to say. Kyrie Swirling Sky is from the new Kamigawa set. That came out while I was in college. So I think my freshman year, I don't remember. So within the last 5 years, this card came out. It is a 6/6, which is larger than a 5/6 for the same cost. And not only are you getting a bigger creature, well, a stronger, more powerful creature, same toughness, you're getting a bunch of other stuff with it. You're not just getting flying, you're getting ward 3. So if you want to target it with anything, you have to pay 3. It's kind of like Feline Entity of Dreams for Wonders players. And when it dies, you get to choose one of the following 2 abilities that can both be extremely powerful in the right deck. So you can get a 5/6 with flying, or you can get a 6/6 with flying, ward, and an on-death trigger of your choice for the same amount of mana. And that is what we're talking about with Simply Better. One version of the card is Simply Better. It might do something very similar in the case of an instant. You might have, something that says destroy target creature if you do discard a card. And the other versions for the same cost says destroy target creature, but if you do discard a card or sacrifice an artifact. One is better because it gives you more options. We are also seeing more oversized creatures. And when I'm talking about this, these are all Magic examples. I am talking about things like Yorgel and Multani. Just massive cards that have no business being as big as they do for as little as you're paying for them. Sheladrid the Apocalypse is another good example of this. She's wildly inexpensive for what she does off rip. And on top of that, she's a 4/5. A 4/5 for 4 mana. I realize that this is a little bit not necessarily the same way that things work in Wonders. But if you think about it, it's like spending 4 energy. 4 energy, you're basically getting Death Strike and it for my Wonders friends. Death Touch, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. It's massive. Death Touch, draw a card, gain life. Opponent draws a card, lose life. Is massive, and it's worth a whole heck of a lot on its own. It's probably a 4 mana ability on its own. But on top of that, you're getting a 4/5, which is a chunky creature. It's not big, it's not massive like Yorgel and Multani, but it's a big card. And it's this kind of power creep that is, showing people, yeah, you can get big power toughness creatures with benefits for less than you ever have before. And so this kind of leads us into the low curve powerhouses portion of power creep. These are cards that for the amount that you, for the amount of energy or mana that you spend on them, you are getting a huge benefit. Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, is a perfect example of this. It's just insane. And there are a bunch of cards in Magic where for 1 or 2 mana / energy, you can play something that is basically a bomb in Wonders. Like, it completely changes the way you play the game, and it's a huge advantage. And so we see power creep in these ways. Lower cost Wonders with better abilities, oversized creatures for less mana than you're expecting, and cards that are similar to cards that have already been printed, but just better. And so it's this kind of balance of figuring out how do you handle that? How do you make the game enjoyable for people and make people want to come back to the game, make all the cards important, while having this power creep going on, while having the game change and have new things that bring players in, that bring the novelty that you need to have a fun game? And different games handle this differently. I'm going to talk about Magic and Wonders because that is what I know best. Magic has bans, and bans in different formats. And then, to be honest, you kind of just don't play some cards in Magic because you just know there's a better version out there. And so Magic says, well, Ragavan's too good. Well, you can't play him. That sucks to suck. And so there are cards that you just can't play. You typically get a ban per format. And so formats are the other way of handling this. Magic has long had many different formats. I play Commander mostly with my family, which is it's a format that allows you to play with a lot more cards. Typical Magic you can play with the last 2 years of cards. And so you don't need to worry about the card that came out 5, 10, 15 years ago. That's a worse version of the card that just came out because you can't play that card. You need to be playing with the biggest, the best cards to be able to play in traditional Magic. Like the game that when people think of Magic other than Commanders, this is probably what they're thinking of. Commander, it's a little bit harder to balance but it's also easier in some ways. Commander is a singleton format. That means you can only have one copy of any card with the same name aside from basic lands. So you're having to get more creative, and also the cards that are simply better versions of other cards tend to be more expensive than that card. Like it's just the way that it shakes out. You pay a lot more for Esper Sentinel than you pay for Isamaru, the Hound of Konda. They're both one drop cards, but they do radically different things. They have the same cost to play them, but they're very different. And so the solution in Magic is you can't play that card you have, and because you can't play it, the value is going to go down most likely. Or you can only play it in that format, and we're going to have you avoid having to do power creep, having to deal with power creep and different scaled cards by only having you play the most recent cards that are going to be comparable in power creep and in power. And that works for Magic. I know that it makes a lot of people frustrated. I've heard a lot of conversations talking with Wonders players who used to play Magic and they tried to get back into Magic, and now the game's too complicated, too complex. I think every game has its place and everybody's going to play it in their own way. What makes you happiest about the game that you play most frequently is up to you. And that's the best part. What I advocate, what it sounds like I'm advocating one way or another, you're choosing what you enjoy best. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Wonders, obviously Wonders has only had one set released. And so it's a little bit harder to say what Wonders is going to do about power creep. Is Wonders going to have power creep? Will Wonders have bans? That we have the answer to. Wonders will not have bans. Wonders is a collectible card game, and they market themselves specifically as a CCG versus Magic as a TCG trading card game. And a large part of the Wonders community is collectors themselves. And so when a card is banned in Magic, it loses lots of value. I had an Edgar, or reprinted, which Wonders will also not be doing. Wonders is doing no reprints, no bans, which makes figuring out power creep and how to deal with power creep really interesting, because you tend to need specific types of cards in every set. You probably need a wonder or creature removal in every set. You probably need something that can banish something in every set. You need something that can get you more lands, or get you 2 more lands more quickly as much as possible. You need card draw. You need all of these basic things to make a set function. You need lands. You need lands, whether they're doing something crazy or whether they're just doing what a land does in a card game. And so if you aren't reprinting anything and you aren't banning anything, how do you have those staples in a card game? We don't know. Wonders is going to be showing us that as the game grows. What we do know is that Wonders is using a system called DBS, a deck balancing score. They just updated the name. I did a whole video about that. Love for you to go watch it. I'll try and put the link up there. Wonders uses the DBS, deck building score. And what this does is it assigns a specific number, a value to every single card. And it says, cool, that card that's extremely powerful right now and combos really well with something else to make a game-winning play, it's got 75 points to it. It's got 50 points to it. And its combo piece has 25. And right there with 75 and 25, you've got 100 points. And those 2 cards add up to 100 points total. And DBS is your deck building score. That is the total score of your deck. And what it says is that your deck is the total of the points of every card you've put into it, and you score your deck based on that. The basic range is 750 and below is Vagabond. So think of these like weight classes. 750 and below, anything below that, you're gonna be probably somewhat fairly in the same ability to play, same deck building skill, that sort of thing. From 750 to 1000, this is going to be the average typical competition format. Stone Seeker, this is going to be, you're going to want your deck to be 1000 DBS points or below 1000 DBS points and above 750. 1000 to 1250 is the next level up. I think it's Master, and then 1250, above 1250 is Immortal. So it's just a weight class so that you can match your decks. Many of us have played a Magic game, if we have, where you've sat down and your deck's power levels are completely different, and you go, this game doesn't feel fair. And so it's a good system to help people figure out, okay, if your deck is 500 points and my deck is 1250, we probably shouldn't play these 2 decks against each other. And you're probably going, but Grace, how does this solve power creep? And the answer is quite simple. If a card is extremely powerful, but 5 years down the road, it's not as powerful, it's not as necessary, there's a better version of it that you could play. Magic is not, Wonders is not doing functional reprints, so we don't really have to worry about that. But down the road, there might be a better version of 1 or 2 cards, or something that combos extremely well with something like Staff of the Eldritch Tribesman. Already a decently high DPS card because people are breaking it right now with Moonfire Crystal Mouse. But we'll see those DBSs go up. If, for instance, we had a situation where you had a card where the newer version was simply better than the old version, the new version's DBS would go up and the old version's DBS would go down. It makes it easier to run the worse version of the card in your deck. If it's a secondary, it'll be easier to run 3 full copies of it. And it may or may not be easier to get your hands on it. So the DBS score of the card affects its playability. Because if you want to have under 1,000 points, sometimes you need the less expensive value, the less DBS valued card to make your deck work the way you want. And so that's a really interesting balancing system. We should be getting a DBS sometime in the next hopefully week, I would think, for Wonders of the First Existence. And then when Call of the Stones comes out in March, yeah, the Shattering is in March. So I'm assuming the set is coming out in March. It's gonna be, we're gonna get a whole new update. It'll show us, hey, this card combos extremely well. Well, its DBS is gonna go up if it combos extremely well with something that didn't exist before. And so there's different ways. Obviously, this is going to make the value of cards stay high. Which is great for the collectors, not as good for players who want to build a budget-friendly deck and they need some of these staples. And so there's a balance to everything. There's a reason that Wonders is marketed as a collectible card game and Magic is a trading card game. And so there's these differences, and what those differences are allow you to pick the game that you want to play and all these different things. And so it's about, figuring out what you want best. And here's the big thing. Power creep isn't about cards getting stronger. It's about the game asking you to give things up. Cool, this card isn't good enough to play anymore, or this card can't be played anymore because it's banned. The games that survive and do well don't avoid power creep. They manage it while still maintaining the players and the collectors, the whatever, kind of player collector or combination you are, they make their games while maintaining trust. And this is going to be a big thing to watch as Wonders grows. And it's something that a lot of people, myself included, are going to be watching closely. We're going to be watching to see if Wonders can successfully manage DBS to avoid power creep, to keep players and collectors happy, to keep the game playable, to keep the game collectible for everyone. And I'd be really interested to see what y'all are thinking. Let me know in the comments. What do you think is the right system to balance power creep? What do you think is the best system? As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and keep being your wonderful selves.